Random J Productions welcomes you to the World Center of Racing, the Daytona International Speedway. For not just any race, we're here for a very special edition of the summer's biggest race, the Firecracker 400. On America's 250th birthday, 36 drivers are all lined up and are just about ready for their chance at history to conquer this very special race on this very special night. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Josh, your commentator, as tonight marks the 7th running of the summer's biggest race here on the channel. Now, of course, things are a little bit different in this year's edition, as this marks our first Firecracker that isn't attached to any series with championship standings, as well as our first Firecracker with these faster and bigger Cup cars, as opposed to the smaller and slower GNS cars from both the old Golf Summer Series and Palm Summer League. But regardless of circumstance, and regardless what type of car, this is still one of the most prestigious races that there is to win, and thus expect these drivers tonight to do whatever it takes to add their name to the list of winners that have been able to conquer this unpredictable race full of both uncertainty and chaos, especially with no points or a season championship on the line. In tonight's race, we have two drivers that have conquered this race in years past, and one of them is starting right on the pole, that being the 2023 Firecracker winner, Nick Sant in the 47. Throughout the course of Firecracker Week, Nick Sant's car has gotten steadily better and better, with solid speed in both practice sessions, winning his duel, and is now set to lead the field after an impressive showing in the Fast 6. The Channel veteran looks to win his third overall Super Speedway race, and is looking to become just the third overall driver in the Channel to win the same crown jewel twice. Another driver chasing the same goal here tonight is a hometown driver looking for lightning to strike twice for the second year in a row, that being the 90 of Matthew Hill. Despite being the fastest during our first practice session, Hill's car has largely been mediocre throughout the rest of Firecracker Week, and with a 24th place starting spot, Hill will certainly have to be careful, but also courageous throughout the night's race to make his move up to the front and have a chance at history once again. And finally, speaking of history, the father and son duo Johnny and Anthony Hernandez have won just about every big race there is to win on the channel, except the summer's biggest race. With father Johnny Hernandez not competing in this year's edition, it leaves Anthony as potentially the last chance for the Hernandezes to finally add the Firecracker to their wall of achievements. Of course, those are just 3 of the 36 different storylines that could all unfold here tonight, and with this field being perhaps the most diverse Firecracker field when it comes to experience, any possibility from anybody in the field could become a reality here tonight. But before we get things underway, it's time to take a look at our starting lineup and special pre-race ceremonies. So as previously mentioned, on the pole is the 2023 Firecracker winner and dual number 1 winner, Nick Sant the 47, while Joe Teen the 78 lost out in the Firecracker pole by just 1/1000th of a mile. Row 2, the 42 of Alex Mullen and XM dual number 2 winner, Caleb Rose in the 59. Row 3, the 11 of Dylan Matthews and fellow Toyota, Brad Rodriguez in the 23. Row 4, 2023 Palm Summer League champion and 2-time Southern 500 winner Brendan Beal, and XM Jason Albert in the 84, who finished second in this race last year. Row 5, Ronald Kennington in his first Firecracker as a driver, and XM JNF in the 95. Row 6, the 56 of Wyatt Walker as the highest starting Dodge, and XM Eric Monaco in the 1. Row 7, Channel veteran Bradley Ream, and XM the 52 of Jose Angel Gutierrez, a former summer kickoff winner. Of course, row number 8 is Anthony Hernandez trying to win this race in his 7th Firecracker attempt, and XM the 2 car of Riley Spurley. Row 9, the 41 of Alexander Rowe, and XM former Golf Summer Series and Winter Street Stocks champion Ryan Wilson. Row 10, Neymar and AC in the 66, and the 3 of Nathan Kidd. Row 11, the 88 of Roberto Crown, who won a most recent Super Speedway race at Progressive back in last year's Palm Summer League, and XM Natalie Gillespie in the 20. And row 12 is car number 12 of Alex Cass Stevens, and XM the defending Firecracker winner, Matthew Hill in the 90. Row 13, Jackson Burgum in the 24, and the 46 of Philip Torres. Row 14, the 97 of Tim Simmons, and XM the 62 of Tyler Carroll. Row 15, Time Carson the 43, and the 5 of Nathan Stapleton. Row 16, Mr. Peptoman in the 08, and the 96 of Owen Miles. Row 17, Frey in the 22, and the 19 of Matthew Burnett. And finally, in row number 18, is last year's Palm Summer League champion Matthew Hubert, who finished third in this race last year, and Exum the 16 of Viper Racing. Taking a look at the track info here for tonight's race, we're going to go 44 laps on this 2.5 mile long super speedway with 31 degrees of banking in both corners. And as for the weather, rather cool 77 degrees Fahrenheit of 8 mile per hour towards the southeast. And finally in red is the fuel and tire window, which is another big change in this year's edition of the summer's biggest race, of just 18 to 20 laps, which is a lot shorter compared to previous Firecrackers, which was around the mid-20s mark. And that's because these new Cup cars are a lot heavier and a lot faster than the previous GNS cars from the former Golf Summer Series and Palm Summer League. So these heavier and faster Cup cars burn a lot more fuel and go through tires a lot faster than the previous cars we've had here in Daytona. So that's definitely one factor to watch throughout the entire night. And now it's time for a special pre-race ceremony, starting with our national anthem. And now at last, is now time for the most famous words in motorsports here in the World Center of Racing.
Drivers, start your engines!
Now, I mentioned in my opening monologue that this is probably the most unique Firecracker field when it comes to experience, as tonight's field ranges from drivers making their first attempt at the summer's biggest race, drivers who have raced in every single Firecracker, and everything in between. And just before I get things going, let's dial up and check in on one of the most experienced drivers in tonight's field. Hey, Owen, Josh up in the booth, got a copy?
Yes, sir, I got you.
Hey man, you've raced in nearly every Firecracker we've had in the channel. What makes this race not only unique, but also really challenging compared to other races out there?
It's, we haven't really used this car very much before, so I guess that makes it a little different. This one seems to be working a lot more on super speedways than, like, any other model I think I've raced on this channel, which has worked a lot in practice. Yeah. Excited to see what we can do.
Alright man, good luck out there. Have some fun.
Alright, sounds good.
Now, even though this is the 7th Firecracker I have covered on the channel, the excitement and anticipation does not get old at all. Here we go. Pace car down pit road. Everyone in the crowd all on their feet as they're ready for not just any race. This is and always will be the summer's biggest race. The Firecracker 400 on America's 250th is under green. saw tons of movement in just the first lap here in the Firecracker 400, but this time around looks like Dylan Matthews. Oh, jeez, Matthews nearly came down in front of Brendan Beal that time by. If she did, that could have caused a major wreck right there and then. And I think that right there, that sets the tone just how much these drivers want to win this race. Anyone is willing to do just about anything to win this race. But that was definitely too close for comfort for Naomi Matthews with the entire field there. She was settled on the outside lane down the back straightaway. You know, Brendan Beal alongside fellow Ford Ronald Kennington both moving up to the middle into turn number 3, where all of them move back down to the inside, with the other drivers on the inside wing being the 56 of Wyatt Rocker and the 48 of Anthony Hernandez, with Beal getting a strong run off turn number 4 here. And throughout the night, you definitely have to keep an eye on inside the lane, especially coming off these corners. They get massive runs off these corners, especially on the inside lane with this package. With Brendan Beal leading lap number 2 that time by. Meanwhile, Beal that time by going into turn number 1 is going to move up to the middle, opening the door for Kennington to go 3 wide for the lead already. And you can see Alex Mullen, who of course started on row number 2, is already losing ground on that outside lane. You definitely do not want to be in that outside lane at all here in this race. They do get good runs going into the corners, but off the corners, this inside lane again is just gets so much momentum, especially with these bigger spoilers. You know, after turn 3 and 4, you saw Wyatt Walker use that inside lane to his advantage. He's now side by side of Kennington for the lead, coming back to start-finish line this time by. Looks like this time by barely. I think Walker barely led. No, Kennington that time by barely led. As those two remain side by side for the lead going into turn number 1 here on lap number 4. Of course, both Walker and Kennington are making their first ever Firecracker start tonight, but the former actually was an owner during last year's Firecracker in the Palm Summer League. But off of 2, continuing down the back straightaway, Walker's going to move up to the outside the block. Kennington, or Hernandez and the 41 of Alexander Rowe move up to the middle for moving back down to the inside into turn number 3. And there you see that big run both Hernandez and Walker got on an inside lane, as the 48's going to be a side-by-side of Walker off for turn number 4. Hernandez having the advantage this time by. Coming back to the trioval, Walker maintains his ground on the outside lane as he and Hernandez are going to be side-by-side to the line. Hernandez barely in that time by. Now on board with the car right behind Hernandez, that being the 41 of Alexander Rowe, and Hernandez just a slight little love tap to give him an extra boost on the inside lane through turns 1 and 2 this time by. And that's another thing you're going to see throughout the entire race tonight. You're going to see drivers give each other a little push. Not too big of a push, because of course you don't want to cause a massive wreck, but a decent enough push to give the driver in front of you an extra boost. Potentially get a run going into these corners here. Looks like the turns 2 and 4 this time by. Hernandez and Walker remain side by side for the lead, with Rowe just slightly peeking his nose to the inside of the 48, but instead going to settle and tucking right behind the 48 off turn number 4 this time by. And I already mentioned just how detrimental the outside lane is going to be for the entire race. And now you can already see Kennington, despite being in the lead not even 3 laps ago, he's already losing ground while the drivers started up front, like Alex Mullen and Dylan Matthews, already towards the middle of the pack right now. He's going to turn number 1. They're 3 wide behind Anthony Hernandez. Hernandez trying his best to block all of them. Tried to go down to the inside of like Marinesi, but instead has himself the middle right behind Rowe, as Marinesi and Hernandez now going to be side by side down the back stretch for the lead. And continuing down the back, Marinesi's going to move to the middle as whoa! Alexander Rowe nearly went down to the middle, but instead changed his mind very quickly to go back up to the outside. If he did, he definitely would have made contact with Marinesi as we continue to do turns 3 and 4 this time by. Both Hernandez and Marinesi both move down to the bottom of the racetrack before Hernandez immediately moves back up to the outside in front of Rowe, coming to lap number 7 once again. Hernandez up top. And you can definitely imagine the spotters constantly yelling through Hernandez's ears on which lane to block, as he's blocked every single lane he's been in so far when he's in the lead, as they're all 3 by 3 behind Hernandez, 3 deep behind. Well, a few drivers here, including the 62 of Tao Carroll, the 96 of Owen Miles, and Nathan Stapleton are all laying back a little bit. So, supposedly to try to avoid the massive wreck that this race is known for, but of course, if you've watched long enough, you know that Daytona doesn't matter if you're in the front or back. A wreck could happen at any time and cause serious damage or would take you out of this race. A little over a month ago, the racing world lost one of its greatest drivers ever. And on this silent lap of the 8th, we'll pay tribute to the late, great Kyle Busch and everyone who have lost in the racing world over the last year. Rest easy, Rowdy. You may be gone, but your memories will never be forgotten. But here in turn number 1, we're 3 wide for the lead. Here's Alex Castellanos help from Riley Spurley, forcing Glipsy to the middle, and Martin Easton to the outside, as he moves a lot of ground in that 66. Down the back, Castellanos going to move to the middle with no help whatsoever. Moving into open for Riley Spurley, and the fellow forward of Tim Simmons to get a strong run into turn number 3, potentially making us once again 3 wide for which we are 3 wide once again for the lead here early in the Firecracker 400. Looks like coming off turn number 4 to complete lap number 9. Castellanos is going to move back down to the middle in front of Hernandez, while Spurley's going to maintain the inside in front of Tim Simmons as these two remain side by side here in lap number 10. Looks like, as I say that, Spurley's going to move to the middle, forcing Castellanos up high. So once again, 3 wide for the lead. Here's Tim Simmons with a strong run to the inside. Move up from the 43 of Time Karsh. Now, of course, Karsh is just one of only 4 Dodges we have in this entire field this year for the summer's biggest race. I definitely think Karsh and all of the other Dodges in this field here tonight can have to take whatever they can get when it comes to drafting help, especially compared to all the other manufacturers we have here in the field. You know, take a look back once again. Again, you can see 2 of the drivers from the Fast 6, Dylan Matthews and Alex Mullen, way back in the pack. Still, even on lap number 11. But of course, in these super speedway races, timing is absolutely everything. You don't want to time your move too early up to the front, but you don't want to time it too late either. But you can definitely imagine that's definitely something on all of these drivers' minds as you get closer and closer down to the wire. You know, continuing down the back straightaway, both Simmons and Spurley move up to the outside in front of Castellanos as here's a huge run for the inside when the aforementioned Time Karsh with help from the 08 of Mr. Pepto Man in his first Firecracker start. And again, you can just see really just how strong an inside lane is off these corners. As coming back to start finish lines, Karsh and Simmons going to be side by side to the line. Simmons, I think, barely beats Karsh to the line. Looks like Simmons barely led that time by. Into turn number 1, you can see both drivers briefly move up as they move back down to the racetrack. With Karsh trying to block Pepto Man there, and Simmons trying to block Hernandez. Both of them trying to come down, so they have time to clear. But now it looks like Hernandez is going to force Simmons up the racetrack, while Karsh is also going to move up the racetrack in front of the 48, once again leaving the door open for Mr. Pepto Man to be the lead driver on the inside, with Matthew Burnett helping him out into turn number 3. Karsh comes down the block in time, as everyone is once again all 3 by 3 behind the leaders. And I'll say one thing too, even though everyone behind the leaders all 3 by 3, there's definitely at least a lot more space in this pack compared to previous editions of the Firecracker with the Solar GNS cars with these compared in these Cup cars. You know, it's definitely one big difference so far in this race compared to previous editions with the older cars. And the one you can see now, Pepto Man moving up to the outside, moving to the middle, I should say, in front of Jason Albert. Hernandez also moving up the racetrack, this time to the outside in front of Riley Spurley. So it was about a coin length gap between both the 48 and 2, continuing down the back straight away. As you see, once again, the inside lane back. Now, Matthew Burnett, now the lead driver on the inside lane, trying to get a run into turn number 3. But as I say that, both Karsh and Pepto Man moved down to the racetrack to block the momentum for both Burnett and Frey. As once again, Karsh and Simmons remain side by side for the lead, with Simmons getting a strong run off the corner there on the inside lane, on the outside lane, I should say. As we come to lap number 14. Oh my god, you get that time by, you saw the margin between Karsh and Simmons that time by was less than 100th of a second, as these two continue to remain side by side through turns 1 and 2. Now Matthew Burnett, now the driver behind the 43 of Karsh. Jason Albert trying to sneak his way into the middle, right in front of the pack there, but instead works to back off there a little bit. That's definitely a very aggressive move, even at this stage of the race. I see Pepto Man thinking about moving down to the racetrack in front of Albert. Looks like he does have enough room to move down in front of the 84. I'm kind of surprised he had enough room to do that, to move back down the racetrack. Now coming to lap number 15, once again, both Karsh and Simmons remain side by side. Simmons, I should say, that time by led, as he moves back to the outside in front of Pepto Man again. So definitely lots of movement from these leaders up front. There's actually a little bit of a gap between both Simmons and Pepto Man, but looks like Pepto Man off turn number 2 is going to close that gap right back up, as Karsh is going to try moving up to the outside in front of Simmons here. But he does so, a little bit of contact there from Simmons and Cars. Just nothing pretty instant there. Just a little left tap there into turn number 3. Here's a run from Matthew Burnett now on the inside lane as he's now going to be side by side for the lead. And speaking of Matthews, here's Matthew Hubert and Matthew Hill coming up on the inside lane off of turn number 4. So we got drivers down pit road. Led by Matthew Burnett, Matthew Hill. I mentioned in track. Oh! Round goes to 95 of J&F. Rapid remove damage. Brendan Beal also around. Tyler Carroll involved. Ronald Kennington involves. Oh! J&F goes flipping a number of times in the 95. Oh my goodness. Already just 16 laps in. We have a caution for a car flipping as the 95 of J&F is absolutely killed. I think that car is crab walking, it looks like, as he is done for the night. And as I was just mentioning, before that chaos just happened, you had drivers coming up here, including Matthew Hill, Philip Torres, Matthew Burnett, among a few others as well. I mentioned during the pre-race, oh, you see the damage there to the 36 of Ronald Kennington, the 4 of Brendan Beal, but I was also mentioning the pit road during the track info. The fuel and tire window is a lot earlier compared to previous Firecrackers with these newer cars we're using. Before, in previous Firecrackers, the pit road window was usually a little past halfway, around like lap 24, 25. Here it's as early as lap 18 to around lap 20 or so. And I mentioned this briefly in the duels. I wouldn't be surprised if drivers tried to gamble with some sort of strategy to pit a little earlier than the window. And you saw there are a number of drivers did come down pit road just now, but with this caution coming out, that basically eliminates any sort of strategy they have at the moment. But the good thing that is going to happen from those drivers that did come down pit road a lap or so ago is that they were restarted ahead of everybody who's just now coming down pit road. So cars down pit road into 43 as well, alongside the 97 of Tim Simmons. Those have been probably the 2 best drivers over the past 5 laps or so, especially in front of Clean Air all in front of them. And there's all the drivers that came down pit road: Matthew Burnett, Matthew Hill, the defending race winner, Philip Torres in the 46. Only Dodge, well, one of only 2 Dodges to stay out, at least in this caution. Owen Miles in the 59 and Caleb Rose. See, of course, some of the Fast 6 drivers are pit stalls close to the pit exit. Nick Sant, Joe T, Alex Mullen, Dylan Matthews, and here's a race off pit road. Simmons barely beats cars to the line with Pepto Man getting 3rd right there. As there's 3 wide, with I think Matthew Huber in frame to 22. Now as for the other Dodge that stayed out, is bizarrely the 56 of Wyatt Walker, and I say bizarrely, and because I have no idea why Walker's even still out here, and there's now getting word from the 56 crew that they're telling Walker to come down pit road next time by. So if Walker's crew wanted him to come down pit road anyway, why in the world did he not come down with everybody else? Because especially, of course, as I mentioned, this race is just a one-off race, no points for a championship or anything are given, so he can't get an extra bonus point for leading a lap or something. Just probably a big miscommunication in my eyes from Walker and his team. And he was also around the accident area during that caution. He was able to drive away, but when we look at the replay here shortly, we're going to see if Walker got any sort of damage from that. And even still, if he got damage from that, it still doesn't make any sense to me that Walker elected to stay out if he's only going to come down pit road the very next lap. But at least it's being under caution. And of course, with these restarts bunching everyone back up together, and of course with the draft here at Daytona, it's not gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be too far-fetched for Wyatt Walker to make his way back up to the front, pending, of course, if he got any sort of damage from that crash just now. But now with Walker down pit road, that's gonna put the lead, the cycle the lead back over to Matthew Burnett, who's of course one of the drivers that came down pit road right before the caution came out, so that definitely worked in his favor, at least when it comes to track position. Well, fellow Matthew, defending Firecracker winner Matthew Hill is going to be 2nd, while Philip Torres is going to be 3rd into 46. Anyways, let's take a look at the instant replay. This caused our first caution already here in the Firecracker 400. So all just started coming off turn number 4. Watch the drivers around in the middle of your screen. The 95 of J&F, the 4 of Brendan Beal, the 41 of Philip Torres, as well as the 62 of Tyler Carroll. So the 95 and the 62 move up the racetrack. Oh, maybe what I think happened, they were reacting to the drivers coming out pit road. Everyone had to check up. It essentially caused a stack up with the 95 going around, as well as Brendan Beal. Carroll going for a spin, and then here comes Beal T-boning the 95 with J&F on his driver's side door, even though J&F was much slower compared to what we've seen in previous flips before. So it caused the 95 to flip a number of times right in the front stretch. So Nicholas's promotion, yeah, exactly what I said. These drivers were reacting to those other drivers coming down pit road. It caused a stack up with the 95 of JNF making contact. I would say the 62 of Tower Carroll making contact with JNF, sending the 95 into the 41 of Alexander Rowe, or Brendan Beal right in the middle. Got stuck on all that and sent his former teammate Brad Ream up in the wall. The 56 of Wyatt Walker also got damaged. So half the Dodges there got damage in this wreck. And you see both Nathan Kidd and Brian Rodriguez just barely avoiding. Rodriguez, jeez, barely avoiding. See Ronald Kennington nowhere to go. Alex Bone did a good job to miss there. Dylan Matthews just barely squeaking by as well. A number of drivers just barely squeaking by here. And then you see Kennington getting into the 95, hit his right rear there, causing more damage already to that 95 car. I think maybe the 16 of Viper. Oh yeah, Viper did get some damage there on his right front. Here comes Brendan Beal T-boning right on that number 95 on the left, on his left driver door. Sending him flipping a number of times. Thankfully, he did land on all four tires, which you saw, both live and on the replay. So a very scary incident regardless. For the driver, and it's just his first Firecracker start. Let's go on board with Brendan Beal off turn number 4 here. So yeah, he slowed down because everyone else in front of him slowed down because those other drivers came down the pit. But then Tyler Carroll essentially squeezed Brendan Beal into Bradley Ream and sent the 4-car around. Also stack up front. We'll see Beal just T-boning JNF right on that driver door again, sending him flipping a number of times. Let's go on board with Ronald Kennington. So again, everyone in front of him slowed down because those other drivers came down the pit, and there's just not really much Kennington could do as he had barely any room to check up whatsoever. It was just along for the ride. Let's go on board with JNF. Well, yeah, hang on, y'all. This is going to be a wild ride coming to the front stretch here. So again, everyone, he slowed down, checked up everyone else behind him. Around he goes, and then shortly here is where he gets T-boned with Brendan Beal right here. Oh, man. Oh. Very slow flip, but still regardless, like I said, a very scary flip right here in the front stretch. Very glad to see JNF's car land on all 4 tires. It seems to be okay, despite him being done for the day. But anyways, we're already under caution here in the 2026 Firecracker 400 on America's 250th birthday. Welcome back to the 2026 running of the Firecracker 400. We're about to go back green after a multi-car incident in the front straightaway that started as a result of your top 5 actually, all coming down pit road early to pit for pit strategy. Caused the drivers towards the back half of the pack to check up, and resulted in a number of drivers, including most notably JNF, Brendan Beal, Wyatt Walker, Bradley Ream, Ronald Kennington, among others, to get damage on the race cars. In the case of JNF, he went flipping a number of times and is done for the night. Meanwhile, speaking of the 56 of Wyatt Walker, he did get some damage, as I mentioned, during that wreck, but bizarrely, he stayed out for an extra lap under caution and didn't come down pit road until a lap after everybody else did, as there was some miscommunication between the driver and the 56 team on when to come down pit road. But anyways, ice for your top 3 here in the Firecracker. The 19 of Matthew Burnett is first, followed by defending Firecracker winner Matthew Hill in the 90, with the 46 of Torres in third, as we're back in the green here at Daytona. And there you see a little bit of separation towards the middle of the pack. As Anthony Hernandez giving Nathan Stapleton a shot through turns 1 and 2 this time by. Trying to cut with those 2 Chevys, trying to catch up with the other fellow Chevys of Jackson Burgum in the 24 to 84 of Jason Albert coming off turn number 2 as they come off turn number 2 this time by. And as he continued down the back straightaway, Burnett was sticking up moon up to the outside to block Matthew Hill, but instead settles at the middle round between both drivers going into turn number 3. Burnett tried to move down, but instead here's a run from Torres as those two are going to be side by side for the lead. Come to complete lap number 20 here in the summer's biggest race. Looks like Phil Torres is barely going to beat Burnett back to the line as those two remain side by side for the lead. with Torres having help from 59 and Caleb Rose, as well as the fellow Dodge, the 43 time Karsh, who's probably the best possible driver to help Torres in this lead group. And looking back at the rest of the field, everyone remains still 2x2, with everyone still trying to get back with the full speed after the restart. As there's a strong run from the 16 of Viper Gaming, despite getting damage during the lap number 16 crash, with help from the 52 of Jose Angel Gutierrez, as always in the wall! With Gutierrez and Tower Carroll hit the wall, and everyone else behind him takes evasive action, including Nick's here, and goes 3 wide below the yellow line. Emerges back onto the racetrack, still 3 wide with the fellow Fast 6 drivers of Alex Moulton and Dylan Matthews. And let's see if race officials will like that move from Nixon or not. As I'd argue, he's okay to go down the yellow line as he was trying to avoid a crash from happening. And speaking of 3 wide, we're 3 wide once again for the lead here in lap number 22. Torres forced to the middle, and Matthew Burnett on the outside into turn number 1. As Caleb Rose gets a strong run due turn number 2 this time by with help from the 43 of Karsh. And I'm honestly really surprised Karsh did not go up the 46 of Torres, who's the only meter dodge, not only in this lead pack, but the only meter dodge to not get damaged during that lap number 16 crash. Instead, with Caleb Rose, and speaking of Torres, he moves up to the outside in front of Burnett, tries to move down to the middle to block Owen Miles, while Karsh maintains the inside, and Rose is trying to block as many lanes as he possibly can coming off turn number 4 here. And as we come to the halfway point here, lap number 23, it is time to crank it up here into summer's biggest race. It is now lap number 27 of 44 here in the Firecracker 400. And throughout the entire Crank It Up time, cars had to let the most laps. And I said during the duels that if that 43 car gets clean air, he's really good out front. But now he's facing challenge from the Chevys of Jackson Burgum, the 24 and 84, Jason Albert, as he come off turn number 4 this time by. Those two yellow cars going to be side by side. So Albert's going to leave Burgum out to dry. He's going to make it 3 wide for the lead here on lap number 28. And Albert here going into turn number 1 is going to get some help from the fellow Chevy of Dathan Stapleton. But now Cars is going to maintain the lead while Albert, Burgum, and El Pepto Man are now 3 wide for second behind. But now continuing down the back straightaway, both Karsh and Albert move up to the outside in front of Pepto Man. Burgum maintains the middle, while Nathan Stapleton is now the lead driver on the inside, with Anthony Hernandez now back instead of his picture in the front of the pack into turn number 3. So the Chevys definitely showing their strength here in this portion of the race. And I mentioned constantly throughout Firecracker Week so far that Ford and Toyota were the two manufacturers that constantly put up the best lap times in both practice sessions, but Chevy has seemingly gotten better as this week went on, as 2 Chevy drivers, that being Nixon and Caleb Rose, won the duels. And I was seeing a lot of Chevys up front here during the second half of this race. But for now, Karsh maintains the lead, and has been probably one of the best cars, especially when he has clean air. And he's done a really good job of blocking drivers. Around goes Nixon here in the back straightaway, as your pole starter goes for a long slide down the super stretch and into the inside wall. And this will bring the caution right back out for the second time here tonight, as there's heavy rear end damage to your pole sitter and former Firecracker winner. And we're going to get a better look here once Nixon comes back on the track of the damage. Oh yeah, heavy rear end damage to his race car, as Nick Shan's chances of getting a second Firecracker tonight look all but over. And we'll see if we'll continue the rest of the race or not. But for now, Karsh once again maintains the lead, with Burgum in second and Riley Spurley in third. And you can see most of the pack through turns 1 and 2 trying to slow down after going 2 to 3 wide during all that time, trying to catch up to the pace car, and sometimes can get kind of dicey here as there's contacting Spurley and Karsh going in the wall. Oh my goodness, the race leader, Karsh, in third place, Spurley make contact off turn number 2. And there might be damage to one of the best cars so far here tonight. Oh my goodness, as I was saying before Nick Sand spun out, despite Karsh being one of just only 4 dodges in his entire field, Karsh has probably had one of the best cars throughout the entire night so far. And we saw this in the duels as well. When Karsh's car is up front and is in clean air, he does a really good job staying up front. But now with that damage, that could put Karsh's chances of winning this race in serious jeopardy. My God, but I don't, at least from my naked eye, I don't see that much damage cosmetically to that 43 car. But we definitely got to get a closer look, and the crew is also going to get a closer look as everybody's coming down pit road this time by. And barring any additional green, white, checkered finish attempts, this is probably the last time these drivers will all come down pit road, as this time by we hit 14 laps to go, putting us just barely outside the fuel and tire window of 18 to 20 laps. And of course, as I just mentioned, this being likely the final pit stops of the night, your pit crew needs to be near perfect on these pit stops, because even the smallest little mistake in one of these pit stops could mean the difference between winning and losing this race when it comes down to the wire here. So definitely some varying strategy here. Some drivers doing just 2 tires, others 4. But for now, Burgum wins the race off pit road, followed by Matthew Burnett, took Pepto Man third, with the 22 of Frey and the 90 of Hill getting 4th and 5th respectively there. And you can see Time Karsh lost a lot of spots off the race off pit road there. Of course, I think they're probably assessing his damage to his car. We're definitely going to get a closer look on just how bad that damage is on Karsh's car. We got some commotion between Caleb Rose and Nick Sant. Looks like Rose may have stalled coming out of pit road. Rose trying to back up. Nick Sant's able to go off and away, but Rose's car may have just stalled right there, as that's going to put him back on the pit road, as his crew is going to assess what the hell just happened. But speaking of assessing, we're going to take a look at the instant replay to see what caused our second caution here in the summer's biggest race. So auto started coming off turn number 2 on lap number 29. Nixon and Alexander Rowe practically 4 wide here, with Owen Miles to the outside and the 56 of Wyatt Walker to their inside. So the two are practically door to door, raining each other out of room and also raining each other out of the racetrack. With Nixant going for a spin down the super stretch, was Ruin making a direct hit into the inside wall. You definitely can imagine Nixant was hard on the brakes, trying to avoid as much damage as he possibly can to his car. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough to take a little better angle here. So it's hard to tell if Nixant came down or if Rowe got into him. Maybe a combination of both, but again, both drivers essentially ran each other out of room, with Nixant getting the worst of it. Of course, hitting the wall. Thankfully, that was towards the back of the pack. So if that happened towards the middle or the front of the pack, that definitely could have taken out a lot more drivers. Speaking of which, just on board with Nixant. And yeah, I think it was definitely a combination of both drivers essentially running each other out of room. Of course, Nixant getting the worst of it. He was trying so hard to be on the brakes, but unfortunately, it was just not enough. He made heavy contact again with that inside wall in the super stretch. And as for the other point of view, let's go on board with Alexander Rowe. Okay, maybe it looks like Nixant came down on Alexander Rowe because Rowe maintained his line the entire time. But there's not enough room for two cars to be in that similar space. Unfortunately, something had to give. Unfortunately, Nixant was the one that gave. And now for what happened between Karsh and Spurley under caution. Yeah, because Spurley was trying to get in front of Staple as Staple was fourth, Spurley's third, while Karsh is also trying to get ahead of Jackson Burgum, who's right in front of him. Definitely bad timing and probably bad communication, in my opinion, from the spotters of both drivers of not knowing where everyone is under caution. And finally, as for what happened between Nixant and Caleb Rose on pit road, yeah, it looks like Rose's car suddenly just stalled right after exiting pit road, leaving Nixant stuck in front of Rose with absolutely nowhere to go. Rose trying to back up, but with his car stalled, there was not really much Nixant could have done there. But anyways, we're back under caution here in the Firecracker 400. As we'll be right back with you guys after this. Welcome back to the 2026 running of the Firecracker 400. And I mentioned before the break that we're going to try to get a closer look to Time Karsh's car after this incident between him and Riley Spurley shortly after the caution came out. And our broadcast team down pit road just got this image during Karsh's pit stop. And as you can see, there was actually a decent amount of rear-end damage to one of the best cars throughout the entire race so far here tonight. And as a result, the driver who has won the most laps so far here tonight is going to restart outside the top 10 and potentially lose even more positions if that damage is bad enough to affect the rest of his race pace. And speaking of race pace, because of damage, the reason why the caution came out was for the pole sitter Nixant spinning out in the back shortly after contact from the 41 of Alexander Rowe. And meanwhile, on the bottom right of your screen, you're just now seeing Caleb Rose finally getting out of pit road after suddenly stalling under caution flag pit stops right in front of Nixant, which resulted in extensive time down pit road. And because of that, Rose is now currently one lap down. But anyways, eyes for your top 5. Jackson Burgum is first, followed by Matthew Burnett. Pepto Man in third, Fraze in fourth. Defending Firecracker winner Matthew Hill is in fifth, as we're back on the green here in the summer's biggest race. Much like our last restart, everyone remains 2x2 through turns 1 and 2 as everyone tries to get back up to full speed. Nice to see Pepto Man peeking his nose a little bit to the inside of Burgum into turn number 2 this time by. See some drivers already going 3 wide. Just Jason Albert towards the middle of the pack, splitting it 3 wide of Owen Miles and Philip Torres. But now continuing down the back straight into turn number 3 once again, like we've seen all the entire night so far, that inside lane gets a strong run into that corner with Burgum maintaining the lead and Pepto Man right behind him. But now off of 4, Burgum's going to move to the outside in front of Burnett, leaving him side by side with Pepto Man coming to 10 laps to go. And you can see a little bit towards the back of the pack, Joe T and Phil Torres trying to start a third line in the middle, going into turn number 1. With now Tim Simmons moving to the middle into turn number 1. And that's going to essentially force Spurley up to the outside of the racetrack, as that 2 car is absolutely no help whatsoever. As you see Jason Albert off turn number 2, so remaining 3 wide, this time with Nathan Kidd and Joe T now on the outside lane. And you see some other drivers towards the back of the pack through line, including the damaged car Bradley Ream. Cass Stevens now stuck in the middle between Bill and Matthews and Ian Marinesi. As we continue turns 3 and 4, Bergam and Peptoman remain side by side this time. Peptoman off the court with the advantage over the 24. As you now come to 9 laps to go in the summer's biggest race, Peptoman leads this time by as much of this pack continues to remain 2 by 2. Into turn number 1 now, here's Matthew Hill making his move, forcing Peptoman in the middle as we're 3 wide once again for the lead. And I mentioned in the early portion of this race of when to time you move. You don't want to time it too early nor too late. But the defending Firecracker winner is going to make his move now, continuing down the back straightaway. And Hill definitely has some help, ironically, from the Chevys, Nathan Stapleton, and now the one of Eric Monaco, continuing to turn number 3, as first through 6 are all 3 by 3. And I think that move from Hill just now just signaled to everybody in the field that if you're not up front already, you got to make him march up to the front right here and right now. Coming to 8 laps to go, everyone is trying the best they possibly can to move as far down to the racetrack as possible, while Matthews and Pepto remain side by side for the lead in the one. This was contact between Nathan Kidd and Dylan Matthews as they come back right in front of Natalie Gillespie and Albert as they both go in the wall. Oh, other cars involved. Jose Angel Gutierrez, Time Karsh, and Nixon again in the 47. And this will bring the caution back out late here in the Firecracker 400 as both Nixon and Time Karsh both stuck on the apron. So just like that, Karsh's night went from extremely strong to getting a bad break of Spurley, and it's now gone to worse. He's likely done for the night. And there you see the 59 of Rose, who was well behind all of that. Of course, he was down pit road for before the restart. But you see also heavy damage to Natalie Gillespie and even more damage to the 84 Jason Albert. I think Albert probably got the worst out of anyone out of that exchange just now. Also damage to the 36 of Ronald Kennington, as this will be the second time he's been involved in an accident tonight. Now, also potentially involved in that, but we got to look at a replay to confirm if that's the case or not, is the 46 of Philip Torres. He may have gotten some damage in that, but he was right near where the action happened during this portion of the track in turn number 1. But looking back up front, the leader that time by was the 5 of Nathan Stapleton, as he got around Matthew Hill for the lead. As Hill's going to be in second, Frey in the 22 in third, Eric Monaco in fourth, and Roberto Crown in fifth. So a lot of those drivers I mentioned in the top 5, or even frankly the rest of this top 10, are drivers I've really failed to mention throughout the entire race so far. But they've probably could have picked a better time to insert themselves in the front of this pack, as we're going to restart this race with just 3 laps to go. But before we do so, we're going to take a look at the instant replay to see what caused our 3rd caution here tonight. So all this really started coming off the tri-oval. The 3 cars to watch on your screen is the 11 of Dylan Matthews, the 3 of Nathan Kidd, and the 20 of Natalie Gillespie. So it looks like Kidd gets a strong run off the tri-oval, tries to make a move on Gillespie, while Matthews also tries to make a move on Kidd. The two make contact, and once both of them come back onto the racetrack, Kidd comes up right to the side of Gillespie, sends her spinning right in front of Jason Albert, if everyone else practically having nowhere to go. Through turns 1 and 2 there. And frankly, that happened really all so fast. Take a look at a better angle here in slow motion. So again, at this point, Kidd gets a strong run off the tri-oval, tries to make a move on Gillespie, looks to the inside, but Gillespie holds her ground. The two make contact, while Matthews also tries to make a move on Kidd into turn number 1. And you see Matthews gets the 3 car loose, sending up below the yellow line. And as Kidd saves it and comes back onto the racetrack, he clips the left rear of Gillespie. And that's going to send the 20 car around up in front of the pack with Owen Miles barely avoiding, but Jason Albert was not so lucky as he had absolutely nowhere to go and frankly barely any reaction time to respond to that. But as for everybody else behind Gillespie and Albert, see Time Karsh and Torres trying their best to slow down, but here comes Gutierrez and Nixon. Nixon piling into Gutierrez first, which results in Gutierrez getting into Time Karsh, with all 3 of those cars going around right in front of both Gillespie and Albert, while Torres managed to hold his ground on the outside lane right up against the wall. So it appears to me, I don't think Torres got any sort of damage from that. As we can take a look at this once again from up above in real time. Again, it just happened so fast. There's just a massive chain reaction with Kidd trying to get around Gillespie and Matthews also trying to get around Kidd as well. And it just goes to show you that sometimes trying to save your car could cause massive consequences for everyone else around you. Let's go on board with Natalie here. So you see the contact between Gillespie and Kid initially. Kid goes off the racetrack and it comes back onto the track, right to the side of Natalie Gillespie. There's nothing much she could have done there after that second contact. On board of Jason Albert. Yeah, there was, again, barely anything Albert could have done there. Nowhere to go. Barely any sort of time for him to react. Jason Albert just a pure victim of what just transpired. On board of Time Cars, who of course got that damage from earlier and was towards the back of the pack. So Cars did a good job of initially slowing down, even as Albert's right in front of him, and once Gutierrez and Nixtant came in, there's not much Cars could have done. So a really unfortunate end to the driver who had the most laps here today. And finally, on board fellow Dodge, Philip Torres. So Torres was right behind Cars the entire time of this crash. Also slows down as he sees Albert and Gillespie, but fortunately for Torres, he was able to avoid any major damage, maybe got in the wall a little bit, but mostly a really good job by Torres to avoid getting any sort of damage there. Anyways, we're back into caution here in the Firecracker 400 as we restart this race with just 3 laps to go right after this. Welcome back to the 2026 running of the Firecracker 400. We're about to go by green after a multi-car incident in turn number 1 that started from a chain reaction contact between the 11 of Dylan Matthews and the 3 of Nathan Kidd, which ultimately came at the expense of Natalie Gillespie, Jason Albert, Time Cars, among others. Currently, the only cars out of this race, starting with Jose Angel Gutierrez, who was also involved in that most recent crash. Jason Albert probably got the worst out of any driver from that recent crash. The 36 of Ronald Kennington, who was involved in this most recent crash, as well as our first caution back at lap number 16, with that latter caution also taking out the 95 of JNF, went barrel rolling in the front straightaway a little bit. You know, as for Caleb Rose, he's currently 1 lap down after stalling during our second caution of the night, while the 43 of Time Cars is currently 2 laps down, but will still complete the rest of this race after making additional repairs to his very heavily damaged race car. But anyways, as for your current running order, everyone except for Matthew Hill and the damaged car of Nixtant are looking to continue the trend of a different Firecracker winner every year, while Matthew Hill, who's the only other Firecracker winner with a stable race car to win this race, is looking to become just the 3rd driver in channel history to win a Crown Jewel race back-to-back. Here we go. Pace car down pit road, fans all on their feet as we're back under the green flag. Only 3 laps to go here in the Firecracker 400. And a great launch by Nathan Stapleton on the inside. It fell from the 22 of Frey off the tribal going into turn number 1. Staple's going to try to move to the middle, but so comes back onto the inside, but it was too late to do so. Here comes Sway with help from Berto Crown now side by side for the lead into turn number 2. Looks like Frey's able to clear Staple handily, coming down the back straightaway this time by. And as you continue down the back straightaway, Crown right behind Frey is going to get a shove from Peptoman, shoving the 22 car up the track as he and Frey now going to be side by side for the lead into turn number 3. And once again, that Chevy dominating inside the lane is going to get a strong run through turns 3 and 4, with Crown maintaining the lead for now. And now off of 4, Crown moves to the middle, trying to block Frey on the outside, also given enough space to block Peptoman, but instead it's too late to do so. Here's Peptoman side by side with Crown with only 2 laps to go. And there you see Matthew Hubert as well as Nathan Kidd aggressively whoa! Matthew nearly got turned by Ryan Wilson that time by. That could have easily been a massive wreck in the middle of the field, but here's Tim Simmons making 3 wide for the lead off turn number 2, forcing Peptoman in the middle. And right behind Simmons, the inside lane is once again forming with the 48 of Anthony Hernandez and the 2 of Riley Spurley nose to tail for another. Continuing down the backstory was still 3 wide for the lead into turn number 3 once again. He has another strong run for the inside lane. You just saw right there just how much ground both the middle and outside lane lost that time by. As off turn number 4, Tim Simmons is going to clear both an 88 and 08 for the lead. As this time by, the Firecracker rookie is going to see the white flag. Only 1 lap to go as he barely comes out in front of Hernandez. That was a very scary block by Tim Simmons. If he waited maybe another second longer, that could have caused a massive wreck. But through turns 1 and 2 for the final time, here comes Hernandez now, the lead driver on the inside lane, forcing Simmons to the middle. Down the back for the final time. Hernandez thinking about moving down to the inside the blocks Spurley, but he's got to do so quick into turn number 3. Here comes the run. Hernandez barely comes down in front of Spurley to block his momentum as everyone else behind the leaders are all 3 by 3. History on the line for Anthony Hernandez as he and his father Johnny have won just about every big race on the channel except for the summer's biggest race. But off of turn 4 for the final time. 7 years of heartbreak, 7 years of frustration, no more. Anthony Hernandez wins the Firecracker 400. And finally, at long last, after racing every single race on the channel and every single Firecracker on the channel, Anthony Hernandez finally conquers Daytona and is a Firecracker 400 winner. Wow. I imagine the emotions right now for Anthony and his father, Johnny, are going to be huge, huge. And what a moment. What a moment. I don't think we're ever going to see anything like this ever again on the channel. But of course, we got to take a look at the replay to see how Anthony Hernandez was able to finally conquer Daytona after 7 straight years of heartbreak. So this was coming to the final restart on lap number 42. So you see Hernandez is on the outside lane, which of course typically is not the place you want to be at Daytona, especially late into this race. Especially as Hernandez is sandwiched by both Eric Monaco and Matthew Hubert through turns 1 and 2 here. But the spotter does a really good job of communicating to Anthony, hey, there's an opening on the inside lane. And he takes that opening off turn number 2. And if he did not take that opening, that was probably Anthony's chances to win right there and then. But now on the final lap, Anthony's on the outside of Riley Spurley behind. See, Tim Simmons tried to block, but because Anthony got that run going into the tri-oval, Tim Simmons was not able to complete his block, and we see Simmons again blocking through turns 1 and 2 there. But again, Hernandez was on that inside. Simmons was not able to complete the block. But then down the back straightaway, see Anthony moving up, getting a little shove from the fellow Chevy of Pepto-Man in the 08. And right as Spurley gets it run into turn number 3, Hernandez comes to block the 2 car. And that right there, despite a strong run from Spurley, coming off turn number 4, and despite Spurley getting a strong run off of turn number 4 and coming to the tri-oval here, that turn number 3 block from Hernandez was enough. But at 4, with that 100th of a second difference between Spurley and Anthony coming to the line. And as the fireworks go off, this is probably a burnout 7 years in the making. Anthony Hernandez, the winner of the Firecracker 400 here in 2026. But anyways, let's take a look at the full finishing results for the 2026 Firecracker 400. So here we go. Of course, after 7 straight years of heartbreak, Anthony Hernandez finally conquers Daytona and wins the Firecracker 400. I just can't stress enough how huge of a moment this is for not only Anthony and Johnny, but also on the channel. As now across both Johnny and Anthony, the father and son duo, they've won just about basically everything. Every big thing there is going on this channel. The Charlotte Roval, the Bristol Night Race, the Southern 500, 2 Bristol Night Races, a Summer Championship for Anthony, the 100th channel race for Johnny, and now finally for Anthony, he wins the summer's biggest race. Just huge congratulations to both Anthony and Johnny, even though Johnny did not race in this year's Firecracker, but still just a huge moment for that family. And finally, Anthony Hernandez can finally add the summer's biggest race to his impressive arsenal here on the channel. Meanwhile, Riley Spurley comes up just short, finishing 4 of a margin of victory, being 4 100ths of a second. Meanwhile, Riley Spurley comes up just short, losing out by just 4 100ths of a second, as we once again have a finish at Daytona under a 10th of a second margin of victory. Meanwhile, Tim Simmons, who of course led coming to the white flag, lost out by just a 9 100ths of a second as well. So the top 3 all finish under a 10th of a second of one another. So that's goes to show you just how close these super speedway races are on the channel. Meanwhile, Owen Miles, after being relatively quiet all night, gets a solid 4th place finish, while Mr. Pepto-Man, who was up front for much of this race, gets a 5th place finish in the 08. Roberto Crown is a driver I thought I was going to talk about more, as he won our last super speedway race at the Progressive Speedway in the Old Palm Summer League. He's going to have to settle with 6th on Matthew Burnett, the Florida native, will finish 7th in the 19. Nathan Stapleton, who of course was the leader during our restart, will finish 8th. Frey in the 22 is going to finish 9th, while Ryan Wilson will run off the rest of the top 10 in the 51. As for left through 20th, there you see last year's winner Matthew Hill. Despite restarting in that final restart in 2nd, he was stuck in that dreaded outside lane. It was never have a chance to get down to the inside lane, so no top 10 finish for last year's winner. Matthew Hubert, the reigning PSL champion, gets 13th. You see several Fast 6 drivers back here, including Brian Rodriguez, Dylan Matthews, and Alex Mullen, all in this current graphic. Eric Monaco, despite also restarting in that final restart in the top 5, is going to have to settle with 16th, while Jackson Burgum, who was up front for much of the night's race, it has to settle with 19th. As for 21st through 30th, you saw briefly in the previous graphic, Wyatt Walker finished 20th despite getting damaged during our first caution, alongside Brad Remes. He also got damaged during that first caution. He'll finish 21st, while Philip Torres, who of course just barely avoided our last caution, will finish 27th as the second to lowest placing Dodge in the entire field here tonight. And I see another Fast 6 driver right behind Brad Reem, Joe T, will finish 22nd. Wasn't really a factor. Joe T, another Fast 6 driver, will finish just behind Brad Reem in 22nd. Alexander Rowe, of course, made contact with Nick Stant during our second caution and spun him out in the back straight. Will finish 23rd. Brendan Beal is another driver who got damaged during our first caution. He'll settle with 28th, 5 seconds behind the pace. And similar thing can also be said for Natalie Gillespie, who was involved in our last caution, as she'll finish 29th. Caleb Rose, who of course wasn't involved in any wrecks tonight, had that stall on pit road during our last pit stops of the night. Went one lap down after his crew did extensive work to his race car. Will finish 30th here tonight. And finally, as for 31st on down, everyone in this graphic was involved in at least one crash here tonight. Starting, of course, with pole sitter Nick Sant, was another Fast 6 driver who wasn't really much of a factor at all throughout the night. Actually stayed in the back for most of the race here tonight. But as I said earlier in the race, just because you're in the back doesn't mean you're necessarily safe from any incidents. As actually most of our wrecks of the night happened towards the middle or back of the pack. And Nick Sant, unfortunately, was one of the victims, as he and Alexander Rowe made contact off turn number 2, sending Nick Sant spinning down the super stretch and made contact with the inside wall, as he'll be in one lap down. Time Karsh, who had probably one of the best cars out of anyone here tonight, despite being one of only just 4 Dodges here tonight, got damaged after that second caution from contact with Riley Spurley. His car is never really the same after that contact. And of course, the final blow to Time Karsh was that final caution with Natalie Gillespie and Jason Albert, after Nick Sant and Jose Angel Gutierrez, who was the first car out of this race, ran into the back of Time Karsh and ruined any chances of him winning this race and finished 2 laps down. And in addition to Gutierrez also being out of this race, Jason Albert got the worst out of anyone out of that last caution. He finishes 34th. Ronald Kennington was involved in both our first and third cautions of the night, with the final caution ultimately being the final blow to the 36 team, as he'll finish 35th. And finally, JNF, after flipping a number of times during our first caution, the front straightaway, will finish dead last in 36. Now, before I sign off here, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has signed up and contributed to Firecracker League in some form this year, despite the rather last-minute nature of everything, and the fact that this was all just for a standalone race, as opposed to a series or even a mini-series like we've had in previous years. Now, I mentioned in the initial info stream that I don't have any guarantees for any future NR races like this in the future, but regardless if this is my last ever race or not, I will be always appreciative of everyone who continues to support any race, regardless of a newer race or an older race, as each race is getting more and more time consuming for me to make and for y'all to enjoy. And I really do appreciate everyone for supporting all my races in one way or another. Once again, a big thank you to everyone who supported Firecracker Week this year, and of course a big congratulations to your newest Firecracker Fortune winner, Anthony Hernandez. And for now, this is Josh, signing out here from the World Center of Racing and wishing everyone a happy and safe 4th of July.